What if you and your children were receiving tiny doses of a terrible poison, a synthetic chemical so powerful that an ounce could wipe out 1 million people? Is that too incredible? Too bizarre to believe? And if that were happening, wouldn't the government do something about it? These unbelievable questions face millions of Americans who are exposed to phenoxy herbicides every day. They are on the front lines of a symbolic battle, a struggle over what values will prevail in this chemical age. This film is their story.
Something's going on up here because there's too many miscarriages, there's too many odd little illnesses out of season, there's too many little skin disorders, there's too many trees dying, there's too many animals moving out, and they should stop spraying at least till they make sure what they're doing.
In Denny, at any given time, there are approximately 20 to 25 women of childbearing age, and out of this population, at least 11 have had female problems, including about 8 miscarriages, ovarian cysts, menstrual irregularities, and 1 baby was just born recently with hair lip.
They gonna raise the damaged children, stop their growth, mess up their limbs? If it was in town, I bet you a buck they'd do something. If they'd got it up there in town, you watch them holler. They would all holler, and it'd all stop it.
If a foreign power sent these spray planes over California, we would all be outraged. They are spraying poisonous chemicals called phenoxy herbicides. Every year, more than 40 million pounds of these herbicides are used to kill unwanted leafy vegetation in forests, on rangeland, rice fields, and along highways and power lines across America. They are the poisons you can buy at your corner store. They come under 424 trade names, like 2,4,5-T, Silvex, KRON, Weed Begone. Your local golf course uses Silvex to kill dandelions. It was even used on the White House lawn. For nearly 20 years, everyone accepted the maker's assurances that these herbicides were safe. Then a number of frightening abnormalities began to appear in human and animal populations heavily exposed to 2,4,5-T. Concern increased when laboratory studies revealed the presence in 2,4,5-T of tiny amounts of another chemical, a fetus-deforming agent 100,000 times more powerful than thalidomide. It's called dioxin, and by now all of us have some dioxin contamination in our bodies. In the face of scientific ignorance of dioxin's long-range potential to cause cancer, miscarriages, and mutations that will appear in generations to come, the government still permits the spraying of 2,4,5-T. It is the politics of poison.
If you feed a guinea pig one billionth of its weight of dioxin, this will kill the guinea pig. 1 part per billion. The sensitivity of human beings isn't known.
Dr. Matthew Meselson, a biochemist at Harvard, pioneered in analyzing dioxin. His laboratory developed the sophisticated process of using this machine called a mass spectrometer to detect dioxin down to the parts per trillion level. It is scientific detective work, finding dioxin in amounts that can only be understood as points on a graph.
The cause of death from dioxin poisoning is not known. One suspicion has been that dioxin acts by stopping cell division.
The phenoxy herbicides cause plants to enlarge and distort, to grow themselves to a twisted, agonized death. It is as though the plant's hormones have gone berserk. Could these chemicals affect hormones in people, causing changes in our physical, mental, and emotional behavior? Tests on laboratory animals have produced cancer, abortion, and impairment of the body's immune system. How much could affect human beings?
Even 1/100th of a part per trillion of dioxin in the diet should, in my opinion, be regarded as hazardous. I think that would mean that we would have to completely prohibit the sources of dioxin coming into the human diet that we know about.
For some reason, they seem to think that if it's poison, when they use it and mix it up and spray it out, well, it isn't poison anymore, I guess. I don't know. But it says poison right on the box, on the labels.
It sounds like a tale from the Twilight Zone, But to Northern California farmer Calvin Hathenbrook, it is all too real. There are no more birds in the sky. The pollywogs and salamanders have disappeared from Calvin's stream, and a strange white residue is left on the drain pipe.
Well, I was out on a job, and that's about 7 weeks or so after they'd sprayed. My knees got real weak and wobbly, and I went down when I was opening up the shed. So I figured the spray, it kind of sneaks up on you.
Calvin can't understand what's happened to his barnyard animals. The cat gave birth to a litter of deformed kittens, and the hens stopped laying eggs.
So I went and got some new roosters and put in here, and then I started getting chicks again, so it evidently ruined the roosters. And I got a hound down here, and I tried to breed him. I bred him once, and he can't breed anymore. It's ruined him that way. And it's kind of slowed me down, too. But then they say, well, you're getting old. So.
At the nearby clinic in Redway, local doctors were puzzled by a series of unusual illnesses.
Just following the spraying, a lot of people began to come into the clinic that were very sick. It was the spring, and yet people were coming in with flu, sore throats, and with colds. When I tried to culture some of these infections in the laboratory, nothing grew out. I couldn't find any cause for any of these illnesses. And what I finally ended up doing was looking at 6-week periods before and after the spraying. And I was rather amazed myself when I looked at the figures and found out what an increase had taken place in the second period after the spraying.
In November 1977, the Environmental Protection Agency sent a team to Redway to investigate. Dioxin dissolves in body fats. If human beings were receiving dangerous levels of dioxin, breast milk would be the place to find it.
Okay, all the mothers discussed a lot of apprehension as to gathering 4 ounces of milk. It doesn't sound like very much, but it took a lot of encouragement to get 4 ounces of milk. Everybody had very sore tits from yanking on them for a full day. It had to be all collected in one day. Baby was supposed to suck off the top milk, and then you're supposed to tug away until you get the required 4 ounces. It's a very difficult, painful thing to do.
The Environmental Protection Agency took milk samples from 105 women in the Pacific Northwest. A year and a half later, those women are still wondering if their breast milk contains dioxin. The Environmental Protection Agency's curious delay in analyzing the mother's milk samples is only the latest incident in a long history of government involvement with the phenoxy herbicides. The phenoxys were released from their Pandora's box during World War II at Fort Detrick, Maryland, where they were developed as instruments of chemical warfare. The Forest Service uses them on 30 million acres of national forest land, and the Environmental Protection Agency is supposed to regulate their use. The chemical industry doesn't like regulation. It cuts into profits. Dow Chemical alone spent $286 million in 1977 fighting what it calls excessive government regulation.
Is scientific integrity going to triumph over witch hunting, or is it going to fail? We think 2,4,5-T is a very important symbol. If we were to lose on this issue, it would mean the American public has been taken back a couple of hundred years to an era of witch hunting. Only this time, the witches are chemicals, not people. That's the importance of the issue. It certainly isn't the importance of the product or the size of the product to the Dow Chemical Company. That's very insignificant. I think it represents less than 1% of the sales of the Dow Chemical Company.
What would that be in a dollar value?
Oh, gosh. I think the total sales of 2,4,5-T around the world are probably in the range of Dow and everybody else, $10 to $20 million, perhaps.
Well, that's not peanuts.
Say, we sell $7 billion worth of products. That's a lot of money.
Sales of 2,4,5-T and the other phenoxy herbicides peaked in the 1960s to fill orders from the Pentagon for use in Vietnam. 2,4,5-T was used in a compound called Agent Orange, which became the prime weapon of American defoliation missions. The pilots had a motto: only we can prevent forests. There are some areas of Vietnam in which scientists say nothing will grow for the next century. With the increased production of 2,4,5-T, workers at a Dow chemical plant suffered an epidemic of chloracne, a severe and disfiguring skin disease. Other symptoms of dioxin poisoning include fatigue, depression, nervous disorders, and loss of memory. Similar things were happening to American troops in Vietnam.
We would see helicopters going across in the distance from where we were, and there would be clouds coming out of them. And we knew that they were defoliating, and at the same time, we were told nothing about it. After my first patrol, I started to develop blisters all over my hands and slowly upward to about my elbows. Before it went away, all the blisters broke. It became one of those wonderfully ugly masses. I thought I had leprosy. I would never have associated it with spray. I was told it was a fungus.
In the summer of 1969, Saigon newspapers published reports of deformed babies born to women exposed to herbicides. There were stories of children with cleft palates, with incomplete spines, children with twisted limbs, even without complete faces. Back in 1965, a study done for the federal government found that 2,4,5-T caused birth defects, including cleft palates and defective kidneys in laboratory animals. That study was suppressed for 4 years. It was finally released through the efforts of Matthew Meselson.
I alerted some acquaintances in the White House to this. And as a result of that, Dow Chemical came forth and said, maybe it isn't the 2,4,5-T, maybe it's dioxin.
The Department of Defense ordered the Air Force to stop using Agent Orange on April 15, 1970. It was considered so deadly that the Air Force couldn't even get permission to return its stockpiles to America. 2 million gallons of Agent Orange were incinerated in the far reaches of the South Pacific on this special ship, the Volcanus. 9 years later, the Environmental Protection Agency still permits the use of 2,4,5-T in the United States. For 9 years, this small organization, the Environmental Defense Fund, has been trying to get 2,4,5-T suspended.
We are a nonprofit organization, nonprofit public interest law firm.
EPA has really not regulated very heavily any herbicides, and 2,4,5-T, like DDT for an insecticide, has been viewed as the test case. That results in the fact that the population at large is being used as Dow's guinea pigs, and the environment at large is being used as their laboratory.
They sprayed it in the forest where all the deer were feeding, and it got into the water where the salmon had been breeding, and everybody's profits were carefully protected, and no one knew and nobody objected to 2,4-D, 2,4,5-T.
Humboldt County, California, is a symbolic battleground in the fight over 2,4,5-T. Humboldt County produces 1 billion board feet of lumber annually, and behind the redwood curtain, big lumber is in control. 1/4 of the people here work for the lumber corporations. Another 20% are out of work. Years of poor logging practices have left the timber industry in bad shape. They need more trees. They'd like to spray about 10,000 acres a year with 2,4,5-T and 2,4-D. This would kill off unwanted hardwoods, which shade the growth of the more valuable redwoods and Douglas firs. It's all part of scientific forestry. At Simpson Timber's Corbell Nursery, Jim Redalius stands in the middle of 9 million conifer seedlings. He'd like them to grow in half their normal lifespan, and he believes herbicides are necessary.
We plan on raising our trees for 40 to 50 years, at which time the final harvest will come. We only have to use herbicides once and sometimes twice during a rotation. Alternatives, the one most often mentioned is manual labor. That could be done, but at very, very high cost.
But a state economic development department report says that hiring people to do the work of the sprays would increase the production cost of lumber by less than 2%. And there are unemployed people who want to do that work. So many, in fact, that they've organized cooperatives, like this one near Redway with 75 members and their own Mighty Mite Mill.
we've been using these compounds for 15 or 20 years on the property here, and we never had any controversy at all. And I think it really is related to the use of similar compounds during the Vietnam War.
But this denuded landscape isn't Vietnam. It's Christmas Prairie, California. It was once a forest. It's been sprayed in an attempt to speed up a new crop of redwoods. But local opposition is mounting. There are petitions, lawsuits, even songs of protest.
Well, one day the people got wind of a plan. There's a rich lumber baron out to poison our land. Kill off the hardwoods, they ain't worth a damn. Harvest the fur, send it off to Japan. And I just want to know, where does the orange death go?
The hamlet of Denny, 19 miles of winding mountain trail from the highway, a century from the city, a kind of Shangri-La to its residents, until the Forest Service sprayed 2,4,5-T.
The National Forest is Smokey the Bear, and it's nice little parks where you can go on the weekend. But the National Forest up here is where you grow trees. And they sprayed it with 2,4,5-T and 2,4-D. Several women had miscarriages, and the Forest Service assured us that nothing was the matter.
I myself have had 3 miscarriages. My daughter-in-law had a miscarriage, and a friend of mine had a miscarriage and had cancer, and another friend just had a baby born with a hair lip. And I think this is very unusual. I've never lived in a place before where so many women, all in one small area, had so many problems.
Well, I think it's happening to an awful lot of communities wherever you have the National Forest. I think people are really getting tired of it because people are getting sick. Children are being born with birth defects to normal, healthy young women. I don't think it's unusual. That's what's bad about it.
And it also shows that people have no freedom of choice. Like I made a decision to come out here to live so I could raise my own food and so I could raise my own livestock without chemicals. And now all of a sudden I have to take them whether I want them or not.
There is definitely a delayed reaction of dioxin in monkeys which have been exposed for a brief time, as were my pregnant monkeys. Their exposure lasted 3 weeks, but they died several months later with dioxin poisoning.
At Oregon's Primate Research Center, Dr. Wilbur McNulty is studying the effects of dioxin. His subjects are fed monkey chow containing minute amounts of dioxin, also called TCDD.
In the TCDD experiments, the first thing one sees is swelling and reddening of the eyelids. Skin becomes tight and shiny, hair is lost. Small boils develop in the skin, primarily the face. One of the major concerns with dioxin or TCDD was that it might cause birth defects. We set up an experimental program to explore the possibility that it might do so in rhesus monkeys, which have reproductive systems very similar to that in human beings.
Initial results of the experiments have alarmed McNulty. The monkeys aborted even at the lowest doses of dioxin, and
there was some deformity of the back part of the palate in the one animal that did not abort at the middle dose. But one animal does not establish a causal relationship.
Based on his experiments, McNulty calculates that 1/5 of a teaspoon of 2,4,5-T could be dangerous to a pregnant woman. Is there a safe level of exposure?
The best analyses that we can do are not good enough to give us assurance that what we eat and drink would be at safe levels.
If there weren't such a thing as safe levels, we'd all be dead. The entire world is chemical. All chemicals are toxic at some concentration, and all chemicals are non-toxic at some concentration.
Marion Tiemann spent 1978 as the camp cook for a group of Oregon forestry workers. It was the worst year of her life.
I got really sick to my stomach a lot, and then I started urinating blood and bleeding from my nose. I had a lot of stomach cramps and bad stomach ache a lot. That was right when I got pregnant is when that happened.
Did you have any visible signs of illness?
Later on, after a couple months into my pregnancy where I was just feeling really terrible, I started getting boils on my face right around my nose, and then on my forehead and on my chin. And I'd never experienced anything like that before. I've always been really healthy, and I've always had really clear skin. And it was painful. No one could tell me what was wrong, and it was really out of the ordinary. Felt bad. I think I was about 6 months or 5 months pregnant, and I started bleeding one morning, and I knew I was going to miscarry. I could just feel it. The pregnancy wasn't right. It didn't feel solid. The fetus didn't feel hard in me. It felt usually like, you can feel it on your stomach, just feel it, a solid piece, but it was all spread out. And when I miscarried the fetus wasn't even recognizable as a baby or anything. It was just a mess. The placenta was whole, though.
Marion's condition puzzled her doctors and left her very scared.
What do you mean?
What had begun as life within her had become an abnormal mass in her uterus.
Yeah, it looked like hamburger. It looked like chopped meat. It wasn't anything I could... It wasn't anything. It was just a mess.
The condition Marion Tiemann just described is extremely rare. It's called a mole pregnancy. There is no known cause for this condition, but scientists are asking, could it be dioxin? Dr. George Streisinger at Oregon's Institute of Molecular Biology. His specialty, the analysis of chemicals that cause mutations.
The reason I believe acridines cause mutations, and the reason I expect that dioxin causes mutations, is because both of these compounds would be expected to interact with these molecules, which are components of the body's blueprint. The DNA molecule, as everybody knows, carries the blueprint for most of our body's constituents. A defect in that blueprint then causes a hereditary disease. These effects would, of course, persist for untold generations in the future.
What is your opinion of how the EPA has handled this whole situation?
I'm surprised that it is taking the EPA such an enormously long time to deal with this question. I've, in my personal contacts with the EPA, not been impressed with what I would have expected to be a vigorous pursuit. That's the best I can do. I don't know why they are not proceeding more vigorously.
We felt someone in California should assume the responsibility for regulating it. The regional water quality control boards have a concurrent legal jurisdiction, and though it has not been exercised in the past, it is there on the books, and we felt this was an issue and this was the time to use it.
John Corbett, representing citizens groups in Humboldt County, sued the Regional Water Quality Board, asking that no 2,4,5-T be permitted in the water supply.
At our last meeting, there was a lot of comment about the emotional issues involved, and that people are acting because they're frightened of something that they don't know enough about. And I wrote a little list here of various things that I have been involved with personally as a parent at home with my kids, not knowing really what I was doing. For instance, we have 3 kids. Our oldest is 13. And when I was nursing her, I remember standing up on a stepladder, painting away on the ceiling with Pentaseal. And the thought now really gives me the creeps.
I understand the risk aspect. I also have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I certainly would not want to be putting them knowingly into a risk situation.
When you get so much conflicting testimony, experts on one side and experts on the other, one saying one thing and one saying the other, it's obvious we don't know what we're doing. And my own personal feeling is then I'm going conservative.
The board adopted the motion, but cautioned that it could be reconsidered following the Environmental Protection Agency's ongoing review of 2,4,5-T. Simpson Timber's Jim Redalia said he'd appeal to the state level, and the spray operators, they're worried about the loss of business.
It takes a special breed of people to be able to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go driving out to the hill with the crew, and they are the person that is the most highly exposed. They've never developed skin rashes. They've never developed any physical symptoms.
My name is Claude Madison. I used to work for the Oregon State Highway Commission, and one of the jobs I had was spray master. For spraying roadsides with toxic spray.
Claude Madison has an unusually high white blood cell count and a persistent rash on his hands and feet. He's constantly short of breath and is losing his memory. Doctors have no explanation for his illnesses. He and his wife Betty are convinced that his condition is a result of Claude's work with phenoxy herbicides.
Everything doesn't kill you in the first hour or the first day or even the first year. And there are a lot of things, of course they're finding it more and more now, that it takes a period of years for some of the results to show up. And I really blame at the very first level the agencies that allow those things to be used before they're really and truly determined safe.
It's an exceedingly difficult task to be effective out in the rural areas. The people we have are ordinary people. They're people with limited resources. And it is not unheard of to have the chemical industry on a single case, a single administrative hearing, spend $100,000. We're dealing with highly technical matters. And so as a consequence, it makes it very difficult to be effective.
Everywhere I go, the same people get flown in, the same experts that are flown in by these various companies come to testify and say, this stuff is perfectly safe and nobody ever gets sick from it. I get up and I say, I have a whole list of people that got sick at the time of the sprays, and so far that's what happens at every one of these hearings.
Take the case of Ernest Freeman. 95% of his orchard near Maple Creek was destroyed by spray drift. Now the fruit that grows is mutant, deformed. Freeman went to court suing the landowner and the spray operator. He had to wait 5 years until the trial was finally held. In court, neither the landowner nor the county agriculture commissioner could furnish a copy of a permit to spray required by state law. When asked if he had measured the wind to prevent drift, the pilot replied that he had dropped a toilet paper out of the window of the plane and watched it fall to the ground. Nevertheless, Freeman lost his case and had to pay the court costs.
Here's a photograph taken a few days after the spray was applied to the ranch adjacent to our property. Now, you'll note along here is where they intended to spray and kill the brush. But you'll also note how the spray drifted over onto our property. Now, you can see the same color of the dead brush over here as you see in this side. It took 13 days for the trial. But the thing I think that was very disheartening for us is that we were told there were representatives there for 8 timber companies and 9 chemical companies. So as one individual, you could see we didn't have much of a chance to begin with. We didn't know that when we entered the court.
Producer David Rabinovich asked what happened to the trees.
What it did to many trees. This one here, most of the trees were damaged like that. Now notice the damage was on the west side, the direction from which the poison came.
We're talking about spraying that happened in 1970.
Yes, sir.
This is 8 years later.
Right.
What's the condition of this land?
The condition of the land, the first thing we did was to remove some of the trees and plant new ones. We did that in 5 different areas, and all 5 of those trees died. So that would explain how the ground was saturated with poison.
Over an 8-year period,
yes.
It still hasn't gone away?
Yes.
Would you say that the water around this area has been contaminated by the spraying.
There's no question but what the water received a lethal dope of poison.
The McGahey family lives on a ranch next to Ernest Freeman's orchard. It's an isolated place, homesteaded by Marvin McGahey's grandfather in the 1880s. When the McGaheys first moved to the ranch, they had no water supply, so they took their water from Ernest Freeman's spring. Their son Jeffrey was born with a rare birth defect.
His food pipe came down to a big ball, and that was it. It wouldn't go into his stomach. So they operated on him on the third day, and he made it.
The McGaheys had their genetic histories checked. They found no incidents of birth defects in either parent's family.
We don't smoke. We don't take aspirins and nothing like that, so or any type of drugs, so that was completely out. So there had to be a cause for it, and what was the cause? And the only thing I could think about later is it had to be the spray. I don't think people really pay that much attention because surrounding me is owned, you know, by mostly by big companies, timber companies and stuff like that. Everyone's spraying, so they don't care. Anyway, he was enough problem. I don't need no more.
Silas Biggin's family used to live on a ranch adjoining the McGaheys, and Silas is the same age as Jeffrey McGahey.
Night, Si.
When Silas was born, his parents were shocked to learn that he had a cleft palate, along with other severe birth defects.
Silas doesn't smile much. You know, he's just gone through so much pain and you know, struggling. I really think, you know, his whole personality is affected by it. I never knew what a cleft palate was until my son was born with a cleft palate, and then all of a sudden, in the clinic we were going to in Eureka, would show it with 10 kids with cleft palates. With some children, a hard palate cleft will be the bone structure all the way up to the lip, and then there'll be a cleft lip involved. He only had the back muscle in the mouth, the soft palate, that was not completely grown together.
But you did go to see a geneticist.
He asked a lot of questions, trying to find some neglect on my part. It kind of made me defensive because I was being so careful, I wouldn't even take an aspirin. And I didn't feel that he gave me credit for being responsible during my pregnancy.
Yeah, that seems to be the approach, or that was the approach that I felt for sure, is laying this guilt trip on the mother that you didn't do something right, or you weren't on top of the situation in time. And now it just strikes me that they think they were asking the wrong questions. They should have asked what was, or where were you living, what were you in contact with, and or what were you eating, just things like that, and drawing out, you know, possibilities where maybe were you exposed to that, you know, what kind of work do you do?
It's costing the taxpayers a lot of money in health care, and it's the taxpayers that are paying it because most of the families cannot afford to pay for the health care themselves.
The Biggins moved from Maple Creek a few years ago. John is now the teacher at this daycare center in Orleans, a town of 600 on the Klamath River.
Have you ever seen a bear cub?
Having learned with his son Silas that the normal incidence of cleft palate is 1 in 1,000, John Biggin was shocked to find 3 such deformed children among the 15 regulars at the daycare center.
He was born with a cleft lip, and as far as we could go back, there was really no reason for it as far as birth defects in either side of our family. And so I've been kind of curious what could have caused it. Doctors don't know and stuff.
Nobody's been able to give you an answer for that?
No, they've done a lot of research on cleft lips and stuff, and they asked us if we used drugs during my pregnancy, which I didn't. I don't really remember anything like that happening before until my son was born. And then all of a sudden there was a lot of it.
The statistics are appalling. In the summer of 1976, of 7 pregnant women in Orleans, there were 3 miscarriages, 1 medically induced, 1 in the 5th month, and 1 mole pregnancy. 4 children were born that summer, 1 with a cleft palate, 1 with twisted limbs, 1 with an eye deformity, and 1 apparently healthy, normal baby. From 1977 to 1978, there were an estimated 7 more late spontaneous miscarriages and 5 more deformities out of 23 pregnancies. In 2 years, less than 50% of the pregnant women in this town gave birth to normal, healthy children. No agency has ever investigated the public health situation in Orleans, California.
At one period, in this trailer park we're sitting in, there were 5 women who were pregnant. What happened to those 5 pregnancies?
Out of 5 pregnancies, there was 1 birth defect, who's sitting beside me, 1 mole pregnancy, 1 spontaneous abortion, and another mole pregnancy.
What is a mole pregnancy?
It's you conceive and the nucleus of the baby starts like the eye that's supposed to start, and it has its center, and then for some reason they have never figured out why it turns into a fungus type growth which never has life, and they don't know why, but it's rare, and it's supposed to be 1 in 10,000 according to books I've read, and we've had 3 in 2 years.
I lost a baby about a year and a half ago. Well, it wasn't even a normal miscarriage. I was proven pregnant by doctors, and then there just wasn't nothing there afterwards. I mean, I started having a lot of problems, and there was no baby there at all by the time it was over with.
There were some other birth defects as well.
There was two of them had what they called rolled hip sockets. The baby's legs look like they just splay out like that, flat. And what happens is the little hip bones roll right in the socket, and the leg is sitting at an awkward angle. And they can either exercise them back or operate them, and they can't do anything until the baby's a year old.
It didn't look like anything. When you put pressure on it here, it would bend, it would slip loose. If it would have been more serious than it was, if it would have developed into dislocation, you would have had to have a body cast. Now, the doctor told me that this is usually something that's inherited genetically. And since there was no history of it in either side of the family, he couldn't understand why he was born that way.
I thought it was the water, that something was wrong with the water. We had the water tested, and they tested it for bacteria content, and it came out negative.
Is it possible that there could be some other kind of contamination in the water than bacteria?
They've been spraying with that herbicide around here since 1975. They sprayed in 75 and 76. And in Solon's Bar area in 77. I haven't heard of any in 78.
They're getting ready to spray now, though.
Well, anyway, this year we've got 11 pregnancies, and they all seem to be going normal, and there was no spraying up until now.
But we're just starting to have meetings here and come together, and slowly the information is leaking out, and slowly, as it leaks out, more and more people are becoming outraged that these studies have been done and there's nothing happening. The Forest Service has deaf ears. They've written in their papers that the biggest problem with phenoxy herbicides is that it makes the people anxious who think they're bad, that anxiety among us is the biggest problem. They won't even admit that it's connected with birth defects and things like that.
Forest Service didn't used to be this way, not when I was a kid. Like, they were part of the local community, they were local people.
Forest Service were responsible because they were government. They were responsible enough to not to do something that would be harmful to the environment or the people or anything. And it's not true. It's not true.
I'm concerned that the use of herbicides be done in a safe and correct manner. And when it is done in this way, I don't feel that there would be any health hazard to humans.
I was on the phone, and I was watching them on the hillside go over top of this water. And he made some remark that I probably couldn't see that far. I told him it's only half a mile by air. I can see that far. That big helicopter's going over that water. And his last statement was, the Forest Service never goes over water. That was it.
In the Forest Service literature that they have, in other words, they don't admit the dangers that are documented in these papers.
They say, well, at the dosages we're administering to the forest, there's no danger to humans or wildlife. That's their statement. And they won't acknowledge that dioxin accumulates in animals, earthworms, bugs, insects,
fungus,
where it's eaten by fish, deer, birds, people. They don't admit that it's a bioaccumulative substance and that it can cause a problem in human health.
Yesterday, Tom Baus kept comparing it to salt. He kept emphasizing that if you ate a little salt all your life, it might be bad for you, you know, when you're older. And it was the same with 2,4-D.
I'm just hoping that they'll listen when I go in and tell them about the 4 areas specifically that are above Cedar Camp Road that feed right into my watershed.
They will, especially when you stress that the little streams come together and make visible big streams, right?
Does this Forest Service station maintain a stockpile of herbicides around here?
We have no herbicide stockpiled at this station.
Yet less than a mile away, this unlocked, unguarded storehouse of toxic chemicals, enough to threaten the water supply of the entire Klamath River system or even beyond. Traveling in water, dioxin has been found in places that have never been sprayed, even the Arctic Ocean.
Now, whether you choose a smart business suit, a pair of blue jeans, or a strong logger's boot, water is something that everyone drinks, and you can't clean it up pouring bleach in your sink. And I just want to know, where does it all go?
Where does it all go? We are forced to rely on the Environmental Protection Agency to guard us from the chemical dangers we cannot see, smell, or taste. How well are we protected? Andrew McGuire contributed to a congressional report on cancer-causing chemicals in food.
You can now go into the store and buy off the shelves fruit or vegetables or other produce that has, quote, been approved, unquote, but where nobody can really tell you that it's safe. We've found not only the pesticides that are sprayed directly on the crops, but also in cases like 2,4,5-T, where it may be used in a forest, but is sprayed indiscriminately to the point where it may also affect cattle.
Even Dow Chemical's own scientists have found evidence of dioxin entering the food chain.
They collected samples of cattle that had grazed on treated land and analyzed the fat. And in a portion of those samples, we did find TCDD. There are range-fed beef, which does go to market. And so, yes, it is possible that some of this beef has very, very small amounts of TCDD in it.
So right now, nobody can tell you, if you're a housewife, that the material you're buying is in fact safe for you and your family and your children. And that's an intolerable state of affairs.
Butte County in Northern California is rice-growing country. There is heavy use of Silvex, MCPA, and other phenoxy herbicides. People in the village of Honcut are ready to take matters into their own hands. They say they are victims of chemical warfare as the planes spray directly over their homes and gardens.
You got a bunch of what you call okie people in here, and they're not going to take it. They'll shoot them out of the air if they come over. That's exactly what they said they'll do, and they'll do it.
What I think about the spray, I don't know what it is or thinks, but the tops of all them goddamn trees all died out. The garden, I had a... Well, you know what feed costs in little packages, 39, 49, 59 cents a package. I had a garden down there, and it didn't do it. So that's all I can tell you. One thing I will say, and tell you for damn sure, is when he'd come from up over there, he'd make a circle this way, and that goddamn stuff would spray your windshield the way you couldn't see through it.
Where they spray this field up here, well, they get up over it, and then they go doing them circles right around. It don't have to be over the field.
You can smell it and you can't breathe. It smells just like rotten eggs. And one night I left my window open and I couldn't even breathe. I woke up and I just almost choked to death. They were spraying at night. Because they spray at night too.
You can't go into court with it because if you go, they won't take it. They don't want to fight the rice growers. I think my next move, I think I'll go to Sacramento. If I don't get no results from Sacramento, I'm going to Washington. If somebody don't get on the ball and help, it's going to be hooly-looly out here next year. That's all I got to say, because these men are tired of it.
The experts say it's legal and none of it will hurt us. If it does, well, we know they won't desert us.
What are the experts doing about 2,4,5-T? The Environmental Protection Agency has spent the last 9 years studying the potential hazard, while the use of 2,4,5-T continues.
Mr. Johnson's office, may I help you?
If 2,4,5-T was a new substance being submitted to the agency for registration, would it be accepted?
That's a difficult question to answer because under our statute we would have to go through a similar kind of analysis as we're now going through on T. But the difference would be that the questions would have to be answered. That is, the burden of proof would have been on the manufacturer to answer the questions before the chemical were registered. The test under the federal pesticide law is to take a look at the benefits and a look at the risks of use of a pesticide.
Our feeling is that the burden of proof is up to Dow to show beyond a reasonable doubt that their product is safe before it is used, and not wait for disasters to develop in the environment before taking it off the market.
So the problem is one of re-registration of chemicals that already have registrations with the agency.
That's correct. That imposes, if you will, a new test or a new burden on the agency, and that is to make a decision as to whether it ought to move against the chemical.
2,4,5-T, it turns out, is one of more than 35,000 pesticides that are up for re-registration. And this is where the grapes of wrath are stored, deep in the bowels of the Environmental Protection Agency. Safety data for all those pesticides submitted by manufacturers as long as 30 years ago. It has never been reviewed. Congressman Andrew McGuire.
Well, we found that they were doing a miserable job, and in fact, they admitted that. Over a 7 or 8 year period, they were supposed to have achieved a review of all of the 35,000 pesticides. The fact of the matter is that they didn't get the job done, and as a result, we have serious public health problems.
We feel that it'll take us somewhere on the order of 10 years to complete a full review of those chemicals.
In the meantime, the substances can continue to be propagated in the environment with these gaps in the safety data.
That's correct. The compounds are registered, and unless the agency has information that would lead us to believe that there is an unreasonable adverse effect, then those compounds will continue to be used.
The Environmental Protection Agency is not doing its job. It is not looking after the public health.
Dr. Melvin Ruber should know. He used to work for the Environmental Protection Agency. Now he's chief pathologist for the Frederick Cancer Institute in Maryland. His last assignment for the EPA was to review the safety data for 23 of those 35,000 registered pesticides, including 2,4-D, to see if they cause cancer.
Yeah, that's a way of the liver there, and it's spread to the lung. The studies were, by and large, worthless. All 23 were claimed to be safe, and I definitely felt that at least several, if not more, were carcinogenic. Studies that were submitted for the safety of 2,4,5-T are no different than those that were submitted for the 23 studies that I reviewed previously.
Dr. Ruber's report was ignored by his superiors at the EPA. He resigned in protest.
The members of the committee were not qualified to do the work that they were supposed to do, and the work that they were turning out was unsatisfactory. Toxicologists would do the pathology, anybody would do the epidemiology, and actually students, high school and college students working part-time, even prepared reports for the CAG.
I was a student that came to EPA with a summer job, and they assigned me the chemical Silvex. I thought it was pretty incredible that they had decided to give it to me alone. I didn't have any background in toxicology or anything. I did have some college courses in biology and chemistry, but that was it.
We've got to fight to have a set of values operating here, which are, briefly, that life and health is the first principle. If we don't have life and health, we don't have much of anything. In that context, you have to look very closely at the question of whose benefits and whose costs.
Chemical McCarthyism, I see it as a situation where chemicals are attacked indiscriminately without supporting data. Basically, their reputation is ruined without having to resort to facts.
With 2,4,5-T, the involuntary exposure to the range of people around who may be hit by drift or ultimately eat animals contaminated with it or drink water which has dioxin, those people don't know what they're doing, would not do it if they did know about it, but the choice is being made for them. It's being made by the users and it's being made by the manufacturers.
And by the government, I would think.
Ultimately by the government in permitting this material to be used while the studies as to its safety are going on.
Is there a question in your mind as to whether there are hundreds of people in this country who have been exposed to 2,4,5-T?
No, I don't think there's a question in my mind that people have been exposed to 2,4,5-T.
And have suffered health problems as a result of it?
I can't go to the second part of that question. I don't have information to demonstrate to me that there have been health problems associated with exposure to 2,4,5-T.
I don't think that they should do it, not when it has to ruin, when there's a possibility that it has to ruin little bitty babies' lives and scar them up and stuff for no reason. It's not really doing any good, I don't think.
You'd like to see it stop?
Yeah, I would. I'd like to have a feeling that this next baby of mine, I don't have to worry about being a birth defect or something because of something that they've done. I don't know, I don't think it's right.
After 9 years of study, on March 1st, 1979, the Environmental Protection Agency declared an emergency suspension of 2,4,5-T and Silvex in forests and along highway rights-of-way. The emergency was based on imminent hazards to pregnant women. The agency continues to permit the use of these chemicals on cattle grazing land and rice paddies. 11 chemical companies and industry associations have appealed the suspension. These products are still available for sale for home use in California.
There have been several developments since this film was first broadcast. The Environmental Protection Agency responded that the documentary supplied new information of which the agency was not aware. As a result of politics of poison, an epidemiological study has begun in the town of Orleans, California. Chevron Chemical announced a halt in production and a nationwide recall of all products containing Silvex. 35,000 people have written to KRON, calling for a congressional investigation of the EPA's handling of chemical herbicides, which may cause cancer and birth defects.